Well, the relationship is the kind that in Finland we have this system for political think tanks that are close to parties, and they get a part of their funding through the state budget. So each party has their own think tanks, but the parties as such don't pay money to the think tanks, but it comes through the state budget. But we also have other funding sources, and we don't have any money coming directly from the party. And we are in the party office space here, but we pay rent for the party, so we are not part of the party organization as such. But our chair of our board is the party secretary, for example, and many of the people that are in our think tank board are party members or at least active in the party. But working here at the think tank doesn't require being a social democrat or being in the party or being active in the party in any way. Well, I did my PhD at the University of Tampere here in Finland in political science. And I wanted to find a place outside the academia where I could still work on research, but not solely on research. And it's quite interesting to be working in a think tank because the research that we do it's faster than what you do in the academia. You have to be all the time ready to talk to the media about your research, and you have to be willing to do that, and you have to be willing to organize events and invite people from abroad. So I think that's just something that suits me better than the academic career. I have been working here since March 2017, so a little bit over 2 years now. And actually I've been here the second longest out of our 7 workers, so usually we don't work that much, although our head of research now is on study leave. He's been here for 9 years, I think, but we have a new director who's been here just a little over 1 year. And my work here is about platform economy and workers' rights in the platform economy and how technology changes working life and what that will mean for workers and their rights. But actually that project is ending, and we have a new strategy period beginning from this summer, from 2019 onwards for 5 years. And we have 2 main issues, one of which is the humans' impact on the world, meaning climate change, for example, and how to further climate change policies that are socially just and further equality between people. And the other is indeed inequality and how to fight against inequality and what are the different levels of inequality and how should we work here to fight inequality and towards equal society. So the think tank's mission is to further democracy, equality in the world, in the Finnish politics also, and we try to be an intermediary between academic research and policy making. So we do research and we aim at high academic quality, but we are not refereed, so we don't have the same kind of referee system as the academic world. But our main task is to bring issues from the academia and from experts to the policy discussion to further policy-based, information-based policy making. Actually, we are in the beginning of that work, so we are kind of starting that work in the fall and not just yet. But I think one big issue is the economic inequality, but also, for example, inequality between different groups of people in terms of health, for example, that other people are healthier than some other people. We can also look at, for example, racism, how that affects people, how different sexuality, for example, affects people and how to fight inequality in terms of those issues, religious issues maybe as well. Equality, for example, between people who have families, who have children and who don't have children, for example. Equality between young people and old people. Equality between people living in the cities and people living in the countryside. Equality between people living in the south of Finland and in the north of Finland, and so forth. So it can be many issues, but I suppose the economic dimension is one of the most important, because you can attach that dimension to the many others as well. I think that our impact to the Finnish society or to the Social Democratic Party is not that direct, and it's more indirect, in a way that whatever we do, everything that we do is public. So what we do is make public our research, we make public our essays, everything. So we have reports and shorter essays and research and writings, blog entries, for example, podcasts too. And we try to have an impact in the overall public discussion, through which hopefully also politicians will take up. But I must say that, for example, I was reading the party platform for this parliamentary election that took place yesterday here in Finland. And I did find that there were some sentences that I had written in my report about the platform economy and how it affects work. So apparently they do pick up something from what we do, but it's not that direct cut, because we are not part of the political preparation process of the party. It's not attached to us. And what we try also to do is to broaden the scope that the party works and try to bring in the issues that the party might not be thinking that much. For example, if you look at the climate change, that's not an issue that a Social Democratic Party traditionally is strong at, because the Social Democratic Party is strong in worker rights issues and unions and things like that. So what we want to do is to bring in also the climate change and how that affects people, and what stands the Social Democratic movement at large, not just the Finnish Social Democratic Party, but the Social Democratic movement at large should take. And I have to say that we have quite good international connections. We have an umbrella organization in Brussels, Belgium, called the European Foundation for European Progressive Studies, FEPS, and also, for example, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, Friedrich Ebert Foundation in Germany, and all over the Europe. So we work, I would say, in quite close cooperation with these other think tanks, social democratic or progressive think tanks across Europe. So we try kind of to take a broader picture of all issues rather than to feed in directly to, for example, party platform. Well, I think that this election was quite good for women overall in all parties, and also in terms of age. I think it's 48% of women that got elected this time, and I think that's the highest in history in Finland. So it's going to good direction. But overall, if you look at the party scenery here in Finland, it's quite scattered. And we used to have three big parties: Social Democratic Party, the National Coalition Party, which is a moderate right-wing party, and the Agrarian Center Party. But it hasn't been like that in these elections, and not in 2015 and not in 2011 either, because now we have also the Finns Party, which is now, according to the result of last night, the second largest party in Finland. So we have 4 middle-sized parties rather than 3 big parties. And I think that now the voters are really kind of gathering around these four parties. Of course, the other smaller parties too, the Greens won yesterday, and also the Left Alliance won some seats. But anyway, so it's quite scattered, and I see that it's quite hard to come into the government negotiations after this result, because it's quite hard to see any of the four big parties to collaborate with each other. It would be easier if the Centre Party wasn't the big loser of yesterday's vote, because the Centre Party, interestingly, is the only party that lost very, very, very badly. And it makes it very difficult for the Centre Party to enter the government after that kind of a loss. And I think that the Social Democratic Party would probably find it easier to be in a government with the Centre Party than the National Coalition Party. But there are issues that are easier with the National Coalition Party, and issues that are easier with the Centre Party. And as for the Feminist Party, there were hopes for the Feminist Party that they would have one seat in the parliament. They didn't get that. And we are going to have to stay here for a while and see whether the party will gain seats in the future. I think that many of the issues that the Feminist Party is raising are issues that already the Greens Party and the Left Alliance are raising. And I think maybe that's the reason why the Feminist Party is not faring that well. But obviously it's a very, very new party. So I think it's too early to say what it's going to be like. But at the moment it has no significance on the national level and anywhere in Finland, really. So it's absolutely no significance, I would say. If you look at the Finns party, the Perussuomalaiset party here in Finland, so there used to be a small farmers party in Finland in the 70s, 80s, and the Finns party kind of is that what it used to be. And if you look at the election of 2011, I think it was a lot of ordinary people, Finns, being disappointed in the old parties, so to speak. But if you look at the change from 2011 to 2015, the party had already changed and its platform had acquired more issues relating to immigration. And it was the line of the party was already harsher. But the party had been in opposition for the last 4 years after its first big victory in 2011. So traditionally it's easier to gain support when you are in the opposition rather than in the government. Now in 2015 the Finns party entered the government with the Centre Party and with the National Coalition Party. And quite quickly after that the success or the support for the Finns party started to decline. And it kind of escalated in 2017 in the party conference of the Finns party, where those Finns politicians who were very vocal about the immigration issues, and I would say some of them represented also far right rather than populism, they took over the party and the party split. And those who left the party and kind of founded a new party called the Blue Reform, they stayed in the government, and the Finns party became an opposition party. And now if you look at the media attention that the Finns party now had just before this election, I would say that nor the media nor other parties really challenged the Finns party for being in the government for 2 years, from 2015 to 2017, and they were regarded more like as an opposition party, which they were right now, but they weren't when they accepted all the, for example, the cuts in the state budget. So it's quite interesting that in this election it was the Centre Party who only had to carry the responsibility for being in the government, and not at all the National Coalition Party, nor the Finns party. And I think it was quite interesting just during the last week before the election, in the election debates amongst the party leaders, that actually the Social Democratic Party, which was the main challenger to the government parties, was just challenging the National Coalition Party and the Prime Minister, who was from the Centre Party, but I would say not at all the Finns party. So the Finns party really managed to be the protester of the government and protester of all other parties, and it was the only party who wasn't speaking about the climate change, who was speaking very vocally about immigration. So obviously it had a very special position where it could really motivate the voters who would think somewhat similarly to it. I think in terms of institutional politics, in this election in 2019 parliamentary election, the voting rate was around 72%, which was 2 percentage points better than the last time in parliamentary election, which is fine, but it's much less than it was in Finland in the 1980s, for example. And if you look at the people who vote, they tend to be older people, quite old people, whereas young people don't vote that much. Actually, if you look at the age group from 80 to 24 years, it's only 47% who vote in that age group. So there is very, very big difference between these age groups, and there are also very big differences between those who are educated and who are not educated, especially in the young generation. So there are very, very big differences in voting activities, but it doesn't mean that the young people in Finland would be politically inactive. They just tend to maybe channel their political activity to other places. So maybe they are the ones who are going on the streets and demonstrating, but I think it would be good to have a way to combine these two elements, because we need both of them really. I think if you look at the turnout of young people in the elections in Finland, it is indeed that you have to look who are the young people who are not voting. And those are the ones who are the less educated and also whose parents are less educated. So also the education level of parents quite well indicates what are the levels of voting participation by young people. So from this it comes to my mind that first of all education should be improved for the whole young generation. I think it would be a good idea to extend the obligatory education until people are 18 years old. This is also a suggestion of the Social Democratic Party. I don't mean to say it just because of that, but I really think that it would be a good idea. And one thing is also that if the voting age would be lowered to 16 years, then the schools would have to take a stance kind of and educate better people in the schools to voting, and also take responsibility of the youngsters' turnout levels, because now the voting age starts at 18, when many young people are already on their own, so they are not anymore in that sense necessarily the ones who don't vote. They are not in the school environment where they would be informed about the elections and what it means. And I also personally think that the way we teach, for example, history and political issues in schools is not ideal, because in many ways, and I think also if you look at the books on political issues, school books, I mean, in schools, they handle many institutional issues. They tell what is the Finnish parliament how many seats there are, and what the institutions are, what's the government, and how do we elect, for example, the parliament. But I think that we should bring the policy issues also to the schools. But because it's not the case that the young people would not think politically or be politically active in one way or another, but in some way they might not recognize that their thinking is political, and they should be able to recognize that how their own thinking links to these political dimensions that we have in the society. There are some tens of thousands of young people who don't get education after the elementary education, and that's bad because in Finland you don't get a job if you don't have a secondary education, like vocational education. So these people their unemployment rates are very high, and their turnout in elections is very high. So there is a group of people who have kind of all the issues that are problems. I think what should be also taught more in schools is media literacy. It's not just about the politics and policies, but it's also how the media works, and also you have to be critical of how the media handles, for example, different parties. So I think that's a vital part in heightening the Finns' overall understanding of politics, because the media is inevitably part of the political landscape, and not just something that reports about politics, but also kind of has the power to direct the discussion at large and the political agenda, really. And this is also what we saw here in the 2019 parliamentary election, that I think the media at large was not very well equipped to challenge the Finns party, for example. And if you don't have any media literacy, you are not able to see that, but you kind of see the media as a truth teller. Although we have also this new phenomenon, well, I don't know how new that is, but post-truth politics and this landscape where some people don't trust the mainstream media at all. So there is this, it's quite a challenge to teach people to be critical, but not critical in a way that directs them to find information from places where the information is not correct. If you, for example, compare to the French, Finns don't easily demonstrate on the streets. So they are quite, I try to find a word, like convenient or maybe a little bit like conformist or something, like not very radical, I would say. In that sense, I feel that the Finnish democracy could be a little better in that sense, that people would be more ready than they are right now to go to streets. I don't mean that they should break any places or hurt other people, but just peaceful demonstrations would be good. Actually, we have seen demonstrations for climate change, for example, here in Finland, that have been very, very big lately. But for example, if you look at environmental activism, it's quite small in Finland, a very small group that is doing that. And I know this because I was doing my PhD on this mining controversy in eastern Finland. But what is very good in Finland, in the Finnish democracy, I think, is that we have very many small associations around different issues in this society. So people have their ways to join associations where they can further issues. But these associations, they just quite often tend to be, I would say, maybe not that political as they could be. They might be more about leisure time activities or sports or things like that. Of course, there are also associations that are politically active and trying to have an effect in the institutional politics. But at least I think it's good to have many, many associations.